But I will say, so I'm just looked at my notes. Right before it gets to the halfway point where it actually gets pitch black, I just wrote, "This sucks."
Oh man.
And then I wrote right after that, "It's getting better now." So-
Welcome back to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great Australian movies.
My name is Mikiah.
My name is Kyle. This week we decided to look at what is considered to be a cult classic science fiction film of the early 2000s, Pitch Black, or set on an off-world that's a desert planet. However, it was shot in Australia, so it's an Australian movie for us.
All right, so Pitch Black came out in the year 2000, written and directed by David Toohey and starring Vin Diesel. With $26 million budget and $53 million gross at the box office, it was not a big hit, but it still managed to spawn two sequels in 2004 and in 2013. The film follows an eclectic group of characters on a transport ship in a distant future that crash lands on a scorching planet. In trying to find a way to survive the endless days of the desert and escape to freedom, they find an even greater problem arises when a total eclipse blocks out the planet's three suns, and they realize there's much more to be afraid of than just the dark. So, Kyle,
So,
I
Micaiah.
did not like this movie.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I did not like it,
So,
but I want to. Uh,
something that I did notice, you would actually be in the minority of that. A lot of people, uh, like I said, it is actually a cult classic when it comes to
Yes, no, it's a
science
fan
fiction movies
favorite. I
from
know that.
2000.
Yeah, I know. I know that I'm not in the majority here when I say that I think this is pretty bad. I'm not to say that there's nothing redeemable about it. There's definitely a lot of interesting things going on here. Um, but you're a fan of this movie, which is why you wanted to talk about it. You're especially a fan of the sequel, but
Which is why I
um,
forced you to talk about it. Let's get things straight. Let's get it straight on.
yes, that's very true. So, just a few things that I did like, though. I'll just start off with that.
Sure.
Just get some of that out of the way. The beginning of the movie, I was watching it and I was like, okay, it's very alien, but this is actually pretty tight. When it's all on the ship, everything just crashing, everything just happens quickly. Um,
Point of information.
yeah.
So David Toohey, I can't remember if he wrote or if he was involved in Alien 3. And this story was actually one of the first drafts for Alien 3,
Well, it
before
makes
they actually
sense.
go to the prison. So yeah, it definitely was inspired, if not immediately brought upon by the Alien franchise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense stylistically for sure. It
Hmm.
feels like there were a lot of alien clone movies after that original movie, and this to me just kind of fits in as one of those, and not necessarily one of the ones that stands out to me. But um, yeah, I like how quickly it starts, and just kind of getting
Yeah,
to
it drops you
this
straight into the
planet,
action.
right? And then it's just kind of the other thing that I liked was Keith David. I like Keith David. I like when he shows up in things. I was happy to see him, and
Yep.
yeah, that's what I liked.
Oh, that's it. Wow.
There's a few other things,
Okay.
but that's kind of what jumped out at me right away.
Oh, all right. Yeah,
So, I know that you like this movie quite a bit
no,
more.
yeah, let me tell you some of the things I like. So, when it comes to Vin Diesel, he's a very polarizing character, or actor rather. A lot of people don't think he's a good actor. I think he's a serviceable actor. I think he was great in the few scenes that we had him in, or like the 1.5 scene that we had him in Saving Private Ryan. And I think the fact that Steven Spielberg gave him that role and it was his first role in a movie really speaks volumes. I do think though that this movie particularly, but also the character of Riddick, is his best character. Iron Giant, of course, is he's phenomenal as the voice actor for it, but he can actually flesh out his character as Riddick, and been following it for about 20 years now. I actually like that. Mitchell as Carolyn Fry, oddly enough. So the main thing that I like about this movie is instead of taking the $25 million budget and going after gigantic A-list actors, especially for the time, they could have gone after a few guys like Johnny Depp or Robert Downey Jr. at the time, or anybody like that. But David Twohy decided, nope, let's just go for either local actors or fairly unknown actors. I mean, there's not really a lot of powerhouse names, but that sort of helps in a way because the acting, I think, is a gigantic strength in this movie when it comes to how little known these actors are and how much, in my opinion, they knock it out of the park for how little known they are.
I
Um,
mean, for I I uh, I appreciate that you found some strength in
there
the
there are
acting here.
some there are some there are some weaknesses,
Yeah, well,
um,
keep it. I actually really do like
but
Vin
I
Diesel.
I think I think that the weaknesses are not the actors. I think the weakness is some of the dialogue and writing.
Right. I think David Twohy. So David Twohy, who is known for writing first, he wrote The Fugitive most famously. He also wrote movies like Waterworld and G.I. Jane. Um, this was his first kind of real budgeted movie. He had two other movies prior that were smaller science fiction things, and then this was a big original idea kind of movie. And I always will respect original ideas. Um, and so I don't have any issues with that. I like that this was made, if that makes sense, even though I don't like the final product.
Hmm.
But like I said, it's a very much an alien style clone movie. You know, you got a small group of people trying to survive in this situation, aliens in the dark on this planet. Yeah, and they're just trying to. Yeah, it's very simple, which I can I dig a simple thing. This thing I feel disappointed because it really seems like it would be right up my alley based on my tastes generally, but it just kind of falls apart for me. And like you said, a lot of that comes to the writing itself. It's just not that strong, I don't think.
My apologies, I hit the mic. Yeah. So I think, yeah, the writing does fall apart quite a bit. I do think, however, that there are some themes that are redeemable for this movie. I would point to before most of the action when it actually turns dark. Most of the characters are not what they seem, which you can kind of get, but it's very difficult to see. The villain is who he is, the hero is who he is, and the person who tried to kill all 40 passengers of the air or of the spacecraft is who she is. And as soon as it turns dark, I would say that the villain kind of becomes a hero, or at least an anti-hero in a way. The hero, who is John's in this case, who you would think would be the hero, actually turns out to be quite the villain character, or quite the antagonist. The protagonist, who I would say is Caroline Fry, Rada Mitchell's character, almost certainly. A lot of people think it's Vin Diesel. I think it's Fry who is the protagonist in this one. She turns out to have quite the character arc, and then Imam, Keith David's character, has children, and the Dark has no children. So it's a bit, and I think that's enforced or reinforced by the fact that the movie for the first 59 minutes is a 1 hour and 49-minute movie. So for the first half, for the first 59 minutes, it is completely bright, and then for the last half it is completely dark. I think it's
Yeah, it
it's
finally
it's
hits the pitch
all,
black
yeah,
about
it's
that halfway
as
point.
soon as it hits pitch black, everything changes with the characters and everything changes with the plot. So
I
I
think the movie gets a lot better at the halfway point. I will say that. The first half of it after the plane crash is kind of where it really dragged for me. Like it was
it
like
was
it,
it
I
was
just
definitely slow for no it was slow and then fast for strange reasons.
I think
I
that there are a
think
lot of I
I
think David yeah,
Uh,
you go.
I think that was mostly just to set up the character of Riddick because we knew nothing about him going in. We knew his monologue at the first start. We knew he was
Which
dangerous. We know he's a
I'm
killer,
not
and we
a
know he's an
I'm
animal.
not a fan of narration, especially
Well,
like
this
typically, and
you
this
have to
was a
put
pretty
that
painful use of it.
you have to put that in context though, because especially in the late '90s, early 2000s, narration was all the rage when it comes.
Oh right.
That's just the
I
way
was
it
like, you
was.
don't need this.
Yeah,
But
absolutely not. But I get why they used it. I agree. They shouldn't have started with narration. Or if they were
Yeah,
going
I was the see the narration was the first thing that stuck out to me as like, oh, that's not great. And it's very brief and it's not really a huge deal
Mhm.
necessarily, but it is how the movie really opens. And it just feels like it's trying so hard to be cool that I just was not like I was just not with it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I do think so. My problem more so in the first half even is Tui's choices to me, which I will always, once again, especially with the director who's not that experienced here, he is making a lot of big choices in terms of the look of the film, and there are a lot of very specific shots that he uses that are clearly very intentional. I just don't think that most of them work very well or are very good. There's like specific, really like fish-eye lens shot that's pretty horrible.
Is that the
And
one where Zeke gets pulled into the hole as he's attacked by monsters in the
no,
dark?
there's like one where
Because
they're just like
there
walking.
that is
They're
definitely a
just
very strange
yeah.
one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of strange shots. There's a couple of them that I'm down with. Like, there's one transition that struck me as very Sam Raimi like, where it was like the bright spot on the sun circle, like transition. I was like, I kind of like that. Like, if they leaned more into the campy B movie aspect of this, I think I would have really dug it. But I think it takes itself a little bit too seriously, and I just never quite was able to get there with the movie. I will also say, did you watch the original cut or did you watch the unrated director's
See,
cut?
that's exactly what I was going to bring up because I watched the unrated.
I also watched the unrated, which I looked up the differences there. I don't know if you did.
I did not.
Um, it's only 3 minutes and it adds no extra violence or anything like that. So the unrated's really just one of those like gotcha titles, because it's just literally the MPAA didn't rate it. So, um, but
Well, that
it
well that
just
was very
adds.
that was very common in those days now.
Yeah, it was. And in this case, though, I really think it was the studio just trying to keep it under 2 hours. But the main differences that they had there, it seems, were mostly conversational. And honestly, I think it's kind of important a little bit just for character purposes. Because there's the one character, what's her name? Shaza, I think?
Shaza,
Yeah,
yeah.
Shaza. When Shaza pulls Riddick aside and basically says, like, I'm sorry I judged you this way, like I judged you too quickly and like that. I was like, okay, this is the only character moment this character really got this whole movie
Yeah,
is
exactly.
to apologize to somebody, which out of the bare minimum made me care a little bit when she just got offed. But and then the other thing was so the scene with Johns and Carolyn when they are talking and then he like shows her the scar and really like she catches him like putting drugs in his eye.
Yeah.
Apparently the original version of it
The
is
original
just
didn't
him.
have.
He just put drugs in his eye and so you just think he's a junkie and it doesn't have the explanation for why he needs the drugs or why he
Oh
hates
man,
Riddick so much. It just cuts that out
that's
and I'm like,
that's a
what?
huge character point.
Right. So at that point you just think he's some junkie. It's like, oh,
Oh
okay.
man. I
So
mean,
I
I
do
mean for
think
the most part he is. I mean the whole point going to the crash scene. Owens, who is the one of the pilots, he has a piece of rebar stuck in his chest. We assume through his heart, and she Fry says that there's some anesthesiphene or something like that, like combine anesthesia and morphine together into a word, and that's what she says. There's some in the cabinet. Ogilvy, the he's like an antiquities dealer, looks over, the cabinet's gone, and he says, "Yeah, there's nothing left." And then it cuts to Johns, who just goes like, "Oh well." We assume that either the cabinet actually was gone, or that Johns actually got to the morphine beforehand.
right.
So and that's brought up by Riddick later, but you would think if he was just a junkie that he wouldn't have given any morphine whatsoever because it seems like he had an entire like case full of it, so he would have had plenty. So
Right.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
think I
but
think both can be true. He has a reason to use, but he's also a junkie.
Right. I think that's true too, but it like if yeah, without that scene, without that context, that character is not more than what meets the eye, you
Yeah,
know?
that character is just a mercenary trying to get his fix. Yeah, that's kind
Right.
of all he
And
is.
as much as this movie is pretty bare bones, like there's a point where it's like you can be extremely bare bones, but also still have characters that are real characters. And for the most part, I don't think this movie succeeds at that. But if you are somebody who's inclined to watch this, then I would definitely say watch the director's cut just for like those. It's like I said, it's only 3 minutes. Mostly it's just extended shots. It doesn't change a lot, but yeah, it definitely adds a little bit just in those two scenes that
And
are
it's
there.
also still a relatively short movie.
Yeah, it's still short. It's not like when you're watching Lord of the Rings and it adds an extra 25 minutes onto a 3 hour movie.
Yep, where it makes a 9 hour trilogy a
Yeah,
12 and a
12
half hour
hour
trilogy.
trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I found the first whole half of this movie to be pretty stale for me. Mostly like bad director choices in terms of like, okay, an example of this. So the planet is supposed to be the scorching hot desert. That's what we're led to understand because the shots indicate this to me. And I understand that this is not a big budgeted movie, but from a director's like point of view in this situation, I feel like you should really be getting your cast to act like they're all like tired and make them look a bit sweatier, you know? And I know that I
That
looked it up because I was
yeah,
like, this
that
is
was both practical, and I didn't at all suspect that it was supposed to be hot. I knew it was supposed to be sunny and overexposed, which it was.
well, with three suns, you and a completely desert planet,
Well, we
and
also
it
don't know
has
how
the
far away those suns are, though.
yeah, but it has there's shots where it's like a wide shot and like the overexposed like look of the movie, and there's a wide shot where it just has like the heat wave ripples, you know, in the sky. I think he did a really good job making it look really hot, but the way that the actors are like directed here, they are not acting very much like it's very hot. Is there was a weird contrast there, and then there was also just with that,
I assume you did look it up because the whole practical
yes,
effect of that is because it was in
50
the
degrees.
it was 50 degrees Fahrenheit, so they had to actually spray on water to make it seem like they were sweating.
Yes, I did look that up because I was like, this is not striking me as very hot, despite the way that it looks and
And also
everything it's visually telling me.
that definitely is a directing thing. I need to stop hitting this mic. Whatever. That definitely is a directing thing. I mean, that's also these are some pretty C-list actors, so
Right,
that could
that's
be it
which
too.
the one person who I felt like was selling it the best was Keith David, of course, because Keith David's just the guy. So, but even still, like not a lot, you know, and I think that's just because he knew what was going on. Whereas,
Well,
like literally,
it was Keith David and his sons because they and it was a good shot. I don't know if you remember. As soon as they find out how to get water from the tap that's being
yeah,
drawn out, I assume it's like one of the things that we see in Star Wars, one of the moisture farms or something like
right.
that. But as soon as he figures out how to get water, they all celebrate and that kind of thing as if they haven't had water in a while. But
Yeah, because that's also the thing. They're really searching for water
mhm.
because they're all supposed to be hot and sweaty in this place. It's just like, it's that just kind of attention to detail that doesn't really cost money. It just is really just knowing how to use what you have. In this case, your actors and your props, you know, just like what you do have. And it's just an example to me of where I think this movie doesn't quite work. I
Hmm.
think that there's just a lack of attention to detail there with the characters, with the setting, you know. That is also why I think all of these things disappear. There's the color palette. I really like actually the overexposed look of it,
Yeah,
except for when it's like kind of the later in the day look and it's like that blue
blue.
tint. It's just washed out blue. I'm like, this looks cold now. Is they
So
supposed to be cold?
oddly enough, I didn't or I didn't see the whole not reacting to the heat thing. I don't know. Can't really explain it, but I didn't notice it. But something that I did notice is Paris Ogilvy, the guy, says to the entire group, "Hey, you better take a look at this," and then it shows the sun, the blue sun,
Hmm.
but Like, why would he ask them to look at, like, why would he come in from the distance and be like, you better take a look at this, and all they have to do is just turn to the left? That doesn't make a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Also, like, the whole blue thing, it doesn't really like fade into from red to a
No.
mixture of red and blue and then to blue. It just goes straight from red to blue.
It really feels like a cheap way to kind of show the passage of time in a
Mm-hmm.
completely daylight environment. And by cheap, I mean like they just changed the color tint,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I can watch a movie that have extreme tints and stuff and like very stylized look to it. But if I'm buying the reality of the world, that doesn't bother me. Here, I wasn't buying the reality of the world, and the color tint only made that worse for me because it made me more confused about what the characters are supposed to be feeling. The temperature, the feel of the planet just kept lurching
Understandable.
back and forth in a way that didn't quite make sense to me. But once again, once it goes pitch black finally, like an hour into the movie, which we were just talking about with Batman Begins, how it kind of gets to its Batman's there. Batman begins an hour into the movie. This movie's pitch black an hour
Yeah.
into the movie. But I feel like this one, Batman Begins, it's like, oh, cool, we're here now. That's great. This one, it's like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. I was like, oh, we're finally at the part of the movie that really matters. And
And
to that extent,
what I suspect for there is it's just like any other horror movie. It's just trying to set up the archetypes of the characters, and it's trying
yeah,
to make you feel for the characters when they eventually die, which most
right.
of them do.
To compare it to the granddaddy that we've already referenced multiple times in Alien, something that Alien does so well, though, is setting up its characters. That movie has a good while before the real danger starts happening. And those characters are all dynamic and interesting. They have an interplay between them. This movie, and maybe it's just in the setup of the design, maybe it's just the characters themselves were never that interesting to begin with. But the just this eclectic group of characters that don't really have any connection to each other and don't care about each other and are just like all there can be interesting, but in this situation I just don't think they're fleshed out enough, and so those dynamics just aren't there. So when people start dying, I'm like, okay, thank goodness it's moving along now, rather than thinking like, oh, I'm sad this person died.
And if you're going to compare it to Alien, I'm going to agree with you.
Which, once again, that's not a fair comparison given that Alien is just a masterpiece and this is what it is. Which, once again, for what it is, it's fine. It's just, I don't know. I've seen Alien likes that are similarly budgeted, but I think better done, just in general, just because. And it really comes down to, I think, characters and then just the design and the reality of the world that you build in a limited setting.
Yep.
Um, which this movie once again does better after it does get dark out, and then the monsters are really there.
And when it comes to at least like boogeyman or monster design, I think it's up there for me. It's a little bit like the xenomorph in a way, or it looks like a hammerhead shark, and the
Yeah,
xenomorph had a baby. But I do like the interesting. It's fleshed out in a very interesting way. The fact that not
yeah,
only does it obviously feed on humans or humanoids, but they also eat each other once they become full adults.
yeah. And I understand why this movie got greenlit because you can easily sell it to the studio. Oh, it's really dark, so we don't really have to use a lot of money to show the monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Which works very strongly in this movie's favor. It's a very smart writing decision from like I gotta pitch this to a studio perspective.
Yep.
Um,
For
and it
25
works
million,
well.
yeah, for 25
Yeah,
million dollars and also the year 2000 and a relatively unknown director, the CGI is actually serviceable. It ages
yeah,
quite
like
well.
yeah, it's pretty good, and the fact that yeah, it is like yeah, like you said, $26 million in 2000. You know, it's not bad. Yeah, and
So, oh, something I will note as well about the monsters. I did have to look this up. Obviously, they don't have it in the movie because there's only so much you know about the monsters in the movie. They do have echolocation, so they
yes,
are attracted to moving things, but they also their vision is around blood. So
Yes.
that's important to note. And
They do
there's
bring
a
that up
I
in the
will say I
reveal.
will say this. There's an absolutely stupid nonsense reveal around
Yes.
that.
It's
I'm not
really
gonna
dumb.
defend that. That is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
I'm like,
Um,
this is a girl, right? The whole movie. And then when
yeah,
it's like, oh, it's gonna be attracted to her
yeah,
blood.
yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
her
they
blood?
they they made it. They made a they made they made a girl's period block device.
Which
But
honestly, that could have worked, but
ugh,
it felt like backwards
I
thinking to
I
me. Like,
disagree
I feel like
entirely. There's not a
I,
lot. I don't even think a great director or writer can make that work.
I don't know. Like, I think anything can work, but I think that the way that they designed this was backwards thinking. That character didn't have a reason to have that reveal in this movie.
Right.
You know, you could have had a female character who happened to be on their period, and that became an issue. You know, for the situation that they were in because of the blood um, vision, whatever. But in this, it feels like they wanted to have that, but they wanted to have that be more of a moment so that they created this character around this reveal that
Yeah.
didn't really have anything like it wasn't there was nothing to it though.
No,
That could have been anybody.
above all the characters, and Zeke and Shaza don't really have a lot. I think Jack is by far the worst character.
Yeah, which kid characters in these
She
types
just
of movies
she
usually
just
are.
doesn't have a lot going for her. She's a runaway and is trying to be infinitely like Riddick, but we don't know why. And we uh oh, all right. But what I was going to say about the monsters before going into
Yeah.
that thing was they actually use and utilize the gestation periods of the monsters. So they start in the larvae
Yes,
stage.
yeah.
The larvae stage is the glowing, basically like bioluminescent creatures that we see them put into the alcohol bottles.
Oh, okay. That
So
makes sense. I
that's
didn't
their
think of them that way, but
that's their larval stage or larva stage, whatever. Their second stage is actually the bats that eat that kill Shaza and one of Imam's children. And the interesting thing about that is, of course, they fly in swarms, but they're actually friendly to each other. And it's only once they get to the adult stage where they no longer fly and they're basically xenomorphs with echolocation, that's when they start eating each other. So they get
yeah.
desperate. So I think that's especially because I we assume because those are the only three creatures aside from the humans that we see on the planet that those are the only creatures on the planet.
Right. And that was the most interesting thing to me about like the the creatures themselves was when they started feeding on each other. Just I was like, that's an interesting world
Mm-hmm.
development bit, you know. And it
And
makes sense. They're like a
it's got some real life
self-sustaining.
basis.
Yeah, they're self-sustaining as like a creature on this planet. And kind of like the xenomorph, it would be really devastating, you know, if there's a human colony there, which is what this movie implies was there. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're a little bit in a way like cicadas because
Yeah.
the whole point of the pitch blackness is for 22 years it is only sunlight because there are three suns. And then for about a month, or I think it's about a month, because of the solar eclipse or the three solar eclipses from the two planets, for a full month, that is when they can feed and then restart
Yeah.
anew. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about Riddick himself, who's really the main character of this movie and the franchise as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's kind of I like the way that he's framed. Like if you took out the narration at the beginning and you just kind of like don't really know anything about this guy at
It
all,
would be so
and
much better because
it's
the
so much
only
better.
the thing that you would know about Riddick would be what Johns tells you and then what
Right.
he eventually reveals.
Yes.
So yeah,
So
I'll
character
agree
through
with you there.
action there. But I think that Riddick is an interesting like he's the most interesting part of this movie to
Mm-hmm.
me. Um just because it's like okay, getting over the I don't know why there was a prisoner on this like transport, but whatever the situation is up there, it is what it is. But him being there on this planet gives the most interesting dynamics with literally every character, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because you don't really know what to think of him. You don't really know what he's going to do in any moment. He gives a slight unpredictability to the movie. Yeah, so I don't mind Vin Diesel in this. He's at his most grumbly in it, but it was still like pre I'm not even gonna move my lips grumbly, where he like in the later Fast and Furious
Yeah, this was
movies, it's
before any of the Fast and the Furious movies, so
right. So
yeah,
he
the only thing
yeah,
we knew about Vin Diesel at this time, he had some short films. He starred in a character that died fairly quickly in Saving Private Ryan, and then he played Iron Giant.
and he had
That's
like
all we know him
Boiler
from.
Room and some other small movies,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, no one saw those movies. This is actually a movie where
This is
people
his
saw
first
for some reason.
yeah, which I mean people didn't really see it though, did they? Not at first, because it only made $56 million.
That's
That's not
true,
really a
but
hit.
it's not a hit, no, but it's 50
Or 53
56
million dollars
53 million in 2000 isn't bad by any
on a $26 million budget, though. That's like barely breaking even
well, true, but
for a
they
low
also
budget
couldn't have
movie.
had that much marketing, I imagine, so
Yeah, yeah. I
it's
mean, it did. They
got to be more
clearly
than breaking even.
the studio was still happy enough with whatever like following clearly quickly emerged from it that they managed to give the sequel $100 million budget.
I mean Justice League 2017 it made more box office than its budget, but because of marketing and everything like that,
Right.
merchandising, it didn't even come close to breaking even.
Well, yeah, that's what, and that's kind of I'm sure probably true to some extent about this one though. It may have made a little bit of money, but not a lot.
It made
Um,
enough for two sequels, or
yeah, I don't know how they swindled their way into a sequel off of
that was
this.
mostly Vin Diesel. The
Yeah,
reason
like
he's
a
got a
hundred.
cameo in Tokyo Drift is because of
Right.
Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing with Chronicles of Riddick, because that was a flop. That was not just that didn't make money. That movie lost money.
Yep.
So I don't even know how they got the third one. I don't know what's going on with like what kind
Vin,
of sway Vin Diesel has, but
Vin
this guy.
Diesel Vin Diesel just showed his muscles and they were like, okay, we're in.
Yeah, like I don't fully understand that, but you know, Hollywood will do what
I think it's
Hollywood
because
does.
Fast and the Furious has made so much money that I think
That's a
they're
good
just
point.
okay with it.
At that point, he had Fast and Furious and Triple X. You
It
know,
is
he had some
it is a
other
bit like
things to his
small
name.
it is a bit like small tangent, but Peter Berg wanted to make Lone Survivor. But before he could make Lone Survivor, I think it was Paramount. Paramount made him do Battleship. You know Battleship.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, no,
they
I
forced
know.
him to do Battleship before he could do something that he knew would be better.
The one for you, one for me that a lot of directors do. I mean,
Yeah.
people like Christopher Nolan, like the Batman movies, were the
Yep.
one for you, and then every in between he would do one for him. So yeah, that definitely happens.
And with Zack
It just
Snyder,
kind of
apparently he keeps getting one for me.
yeah, Zack Snyder just has like this weird fan base that will allow him to keep making movies for way too much money that don't do well.
Yeah,
Or now at this point, he's just on Netflix and they never have to say how well they're doing.
that's true.
So
Or he can just release an ultimate edition of his movie that's like one
that
and a
cost
half more
$75
hours long.
million
Yep, extra.
produce and then put on HBO Max for free.
Yeah,
Yeah, those idiot moves.
that's a loss right there.
So Tui though, he never really did the me, despite never doing a one for you. And then all he really did after this was Riddick movies, like the
Yep.
other two. Like he hasn't really directed a lot other than Riddick movies.
Which one of them
Um,
is still in production? It's Riddick Fury,
yeah,
but we have no idea when that's going to get off the ground. But honestly, as a fan of this franchise, I've waited 20 years for only two extra movies, so
yeah,
I'm fine them waiting. I don't want them to go the way of anything like Star Wars, where they just pump out way too much, way too quick for no reason at all.
right, right. Like the
I've
oversaturation.
always
The scarcity is
it's
sometimes
not
a good
just
thing.
saturation, it's rush jobs. That's always been my opinion. I'm okay waiting, and I'm like that with movies and video games. So
Yeah. Speaking of
I'm a
video
patient fan.
games, I've actually heard that the video
It's
games that they made for this are
phenomenal.
actually pretty good.
The
They
Chronicles
are
of Riddick game that came out, I want to say it was early
the
2000s.
Butcher Bay one.
Butcher Bay, yep.
It came out in 2003. It was a prequel to this before
Hmm.
Chronicles of Riddick came out.
Yep, and they actually bring it up in Chronicles of Riddick. And yeah, the the Chronicles of Riddick video game is one of the most underrated video game in my opinion. It is a
That's
great game.
that's what I've heard. I've heard it's good. So
I
Maybe
think
where they
it's I
weren't
think it's
succeeding in film.
I think it's because the plot line of these movies works so much better as video games.
Yeah.
Because they are quite interesting. It's like a train wreck in slow motion. You can't look away from it, but you know it's going to be bad. But I think that's why it works for video games because video games often don't have to take themselves too seriously. It's why video game movies rarely make sense or even do
Well,
well without
yeah.
completely gutting the whole premise of a video game. Like
Especially in the
Detective
early
Pikachu.
2000s. Yeah.
Detective
Early
Pikachu
two.
doesn't make any sense for Pokemon.
Yeah. The 2000s games, particularly, um, were very much willing to be kind of over the top and like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of like
Yeah,
soundtrack to it.
Enter the Matrix, which came out, I think, after Matrix Reloaded, but before Matrix Revolutions. Could be wrong about that, but I that's also another great video game based on a movie franchise, and it came
And
out around the same time.
yeah, speaking of the Matrix, thank goodness that this movie, much to my surprise, because the look of it screamed to me that it was going to be overloaded with slow motion and other stuff like
Yep.
that. I'm like, thank goodness, because this was 1 year after The Matrix, and it totally could have had all that stuff like every other movie that came out right after The Matrix, especially action movies. And they did not do any of that, and I was like, oh, yes, relief, sweet relief.
Well, of course, Zack Snyder was not making movies by then, so or he wasn't making
Uh,
big action movies, so there wasn't a lot of slow motion to be had.
yeah, but yeah, he has those little 2000s looking goggles that crack me up a bit in this.
Yeah, it is a little bit weird. Um,
Yeah, but I will say, so I'm just looked at my notes. Right before it gets to the halfway point where it actually gets pitch black, I just wrote, "This sucks."
oh man.
And then I wrote right after that, "It's getting better now." So, I will say, so you have the Paris character who, when they, I really liked when they left the um the place that they were hiding out in, and they finally got up to leave that, and they have like those glowy lights that they're all surrounded by because they realize the
Yeah.
lights hit the creature. That's a really cool sequence where they're walking out of there. Then you have the idiot Paris character who I was like, oh, this guy's gonna die and be annoying to everybody when he does it. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly what happened. But
Does
I
not
did
make a lot of
like
sense,
he did
like at
deliver
all.
to me what I could think was the best line of the movie, right before he dies. Like, I'm all about the before the kill, after the kill lines, you
Hmm.
know? And he said, I was supposed to die in France,
Yeah.
which I was like, oh, that's pretty good. That's not bad for this character to go out with a line like that, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
it's pretty much universally hated the fact that they were so close to getting to the actual ship and then he just breaks off and breaks the entire like thing that they were using to get there.
yeah, he's a
Does
character
not
who's
make a lot of
designed to be
sense.
hated, you know?
I
He's
actually didn't.
annoying.
I actually, sure he was annoying, but I actually didn't hate him up until that point. I thought he was. I thought he was okay. I thought
Yeah,
he was just what. I think I cannot remember the character that's surrounding it, but one of my favorite lines is it's well it's Paris that says this, but when he finds the third son, he goes like, "Well, there goes our chance for darkness," and he says, "There goes my chance for cocktail hour."
yeah, he has a couple of lines in there that work. Like that character to me worked overall.
Yeah,
I just was like his archetype to me was like I know what this character is going to be
yeah.
by the time he goes out, and it's going to be a nuisance to everybody. um, yeah,
S-
and then that kind of leads into where they're just holding the torches, and then him and Johns walk ahead, and then there's the altercation
mhm.
there, and then once Johns is taken out, I was like, okay, well now who's there's not really much of an antagonistic presence as far as like the conflict between the characters at that point, comparatively, other than I guess it shifts the focus
It
to
it
Riddick.
it it shifts the focus to what is Riddick going to do now that his main antagonist is gone, but he still has to get off the planet
Yeah, with these other people who are
with
more innocent.
right with these other people. Not only that, the reason why I like Fry's and Riddick's chemistry here is close to the end. Obviously, they make it to the ship where Imam and Jack are still in the cave,
Yeah.
and Vin Diesel or Riddick is for some reason desperately trying to persuade her to just get on the ship and leave them behind, and she can't. And I think that it obviously it's a bit on the nose, but I think it's a great character arc that when she didn't know these people at all, when they were just passengers, she wanted to get rid of them to save her own ass. But
Yeah.
now that she knows them, she's obligated and basically cannot force herself to get on the ship. Rather, she has to go back for them.
Yeah. It's like
And
the whole it's hard to hate people up close kind of
right.
thing.
And something that I notice is because Riddick thinks he read her perfectly when he found out that she was going to drop them. He thinks that she can use her to just get him off the planet. But when he figures out that she's obviously going to go back for them, he says the line, how interesting,
Yeah.
because of course he's got his animal side and that's all he knows, but he's never come across somebody who he thought was self-interested who actually changed their mind.
Right.
I think that's a
Yeah,
small
it
nugget of brilliance there.
she definitely has the most arc
Hmm.
out of all the characters because of that. And I do think that that works overall up to that point though, because then it gets to the whole they go back, they rescue the Jack and Imam,
Yep.
and then they all get back to the ship, and then Riddick is kind of pinned down by a couple of um the monsters, and they're like, "Oh, we maybe we don't go back for him. He's probably gone." And they hear him yell, and then she runs over to help him,
Hmm.
and then he's like bleeding and everything, and then I was a little bit unclear on this. Did he kill her and then a monster took her, or did a monster just take
No,
her?
no. So that and that's something when I first saw this movie, I was like, "Son, why would you kill her? That does not make a lot of sense. Just like grab her and then start running." But no, a monster gets her because that's the only time that you can see actual like tears go down his face. And
Yeah, it
why
just
in the
yeah
world would he kill her and cry?
yeah it was weird. Like it just felt weird.
It's very weirdly
It's very
shot.
abrupt.
It's very
Yeah, it's
weirdly shot
yeah
where it kind of allows you to think that he killed her, but then like after you hear the stab, she gets immediately pulled. I don't think there's a sound effect of her getting stabbed twice, or
yeah.
maybe there is, but
I don't know.
she gets stabbed and then pulled. So I think she got
It's
hit by a
just so
monster
abrupt and like anticlimactic, you
a bit.
know?
Yeah.
It felt important that she goes through this arc and that
Hmm.
they're at the end and they're at the finish line. And the movie once again doesn't do enough to make me still care about this character. They
Yeah.
give her a decent arc, but I don't care a lot about her. So the only thing that they could really do at this point is like have her complete her mission of actually saving people rather than ditching them like she wanted to at the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, but then they just kind of like kill her off very quickly, and then Riddick just leaves, and then they're flying away, and they're like, "What do we say?" It's like, "Tell them Riddick died on that planet,"
Yeah.
and then the movie ends, and I'm like,
Another reason why I don't think he killed her is
"Yeah,
because he shuts off the engine to lure more of them in and then kills them all. I think that was out of
right,
revenge for Fry. So I
yeah, yeah." It was just like the whole ending of this movie was just from her death and then to just the very ending, which is not a lot, but it's just I feel like you're supposed to feel some sort of triumph, some sort of relief in like when somebody escapes the situation. I was just like, oh, okay. It's over now. And that was all I kind of felt at the movie ending.
I
That was
think there's not really much of a triumph, but there's a slight relief.
yeah, I
Uh,
didn't really get that. I was just like I guess they're gone now. That's good that they got off, I guess. Like I wouldn't have cared one way or another. They once again, it's just I didn't get invested in the characters. I was relieved to see that Keith David actually made it to the end of the movie because that barely ever happens.
yeah.
But yeah,
I
overall I
I
was left with a very
I
kind
will
of just
say
underwhelmed feeling.
this: the original script called for not only the Riddick or the character of Riddick being a female, but they also had the criminal character, whether that be Riddick or not. They had that person dying off and Fry piloting the ship away. So it
Yeah,
and the entire reason why they swapped it is because of Vin Diesel. So you can blame Vin Diesel for a weird ending.
that makes sense. I mean, he's always had this kind of weird control over the scripts that he's
Yeah.
in for the franchises that he leads, which, I mean, good for him, I
And
guess,
like I
but
said, if it leads to more movies like this, I can overlook it.
yeah, for me, I was like, I don't need another one. And I have seen Chronicles of Riddick, and I do not like that movie. That one, this is better than that one for sure. But
Yeah,
it's been a while though.
Pitch Black is definitely the best of the three. But as I will say always, guilty pleasure movie of mine. I recognize
Yeah,
its flaws. Don't care though.
yeah, yeah. No, and like I've said, most people do like this. So, um,
Which honestly, I kind of understand why it's like dumb fun in a way that the Fast and Furious movies kind of are, but like a sci-fi version of it. I of course haven't seen
yeah.
any of the Fast and Furious movies, so that's just what I've heard.
Oh,
But
well, got some homework to do.
oh, absolutely not.
Someday I'll get you to watch at least the first one because that one's just pure 2001 as much as
Pure
2001
pure
could movie.
2001.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a space odyssey. Um, but yeah, like yeah, that's
That's what we should title this episode. Vin Diesel 2001 is a Space Odyssey. It'd
um
be 2000 though.
okay, let's see.
If
The
you want to do the recap for how the points work, since I did it last time.
All right, so now that we've talked about the movie, we're going to go over some of our points for the scoring. The way we do our scoring on this show as of right now is we just break down some key topics about the movie and rank it from 0 to 2. 0 being we didn't like that, 1 being I think it's good, and 2 being I think it's great. So we'll start breaking down those topics and we'll talk about that and kind of debate between ourselves of what we think each topic should be. All
So
right.
we can start with writing. I think I know what you're gonna do, but I'm gonna plead my case real quick. Now, obviously, this film has a lot of problems when it comes to writing, but I think some of the themes work for it. I think some of the dialogue is weird, but I do think there are some nuggets of brilliance. The ones that I've stated before. There's also a scene where Riddick looks around the corner, says looks clear. John starts walking out, a monster comes out, and he says, I thought you said it was clear." And he said, "I said it looks clear." And then he looks back out, and Riddick says, "Looks clear." Things like that, things like that to me are just brilliant dialogue writing, especially since we know the dynamic of the characters. There's when it comes to plot, it's saved a little bit by the second half, like you said. I do think some of the first half works. A lot of the first half doesn't. I think it is enough for me to award it a 1 because we can't do point 0.5. I don't think it's quite a 0. I definitely don't think it's a 2. So I personally would go with a 1.
Yeah, I'd personally go with 0 here, but I'm willing to bend to give you the 1 because it is an original concept. I don't think all of the writing is atrocious. I just think the characters are very poorly developed and I never really cared about anything that I was watching. There are some creative ideas though, and so I'm willing to bend to give you the 1 on this one.
We do have the characters one as well.
Yes.
But up next we have world building.
I'll give world building a 1. I think that, like I said, I think the world that they're on, despite the fact that I think that the direction within the world, like setting it up, isn't great. I do think it's an interesting planet idea that's pretty unique. I've not seen something exactly like that before. Um, and I like the monsters themselves and the way that you like we talked about where you get the different states of the monster at different ages and the way they attack each other. It's kind of an interesting ecosystem that they build for the world. So I think the world building is pretty good. I'm not going to say it's great. I'm still like 1 out of 2, but
I'm going to completely agree. I do think, yeah, I definitely think that the first time I saw this movie, I wanted to see more purely because of I thought that they could do a very good job at world building, or I think this was definitely an interesting topic for a franchise.
yeah.
It had its ups and downs, but I do think it's this remotely successful franchise for what it is. So yeah, I will agree. I'll give it a one. Next up is
Yeah.
characters. I'll let you start.
Characters, I would just give a big fat zero. I really don't care about anybody in this movie at all. Riddick is the most interesting character. Not to say that I even care about him as a character. Like, I wouldn't really be that interested in watching a sequel following that character personally, based on this one alone. Um, I do think that there are some occasional interplay things that are kind of interesting, but once again, the characters themselves just are not well rounded. They're not fleshed out, even in a minimalistic kind of way. And the few scenes that do flesh out certain side characters, even just the tiniest amount, weren't even included in the original cut of the film because they're that minimalistic and they're that unimportant ultimately.
So I'm gonna agree with you here. I would personally go with a one because I think most of the main characters, or at least the big three, really play off each other well. And I think that the two character arcs for the two biggest characters, I think, are enough for me to put it over the top. Most of the smaller characters, Zeke, Shaza, Jack, even a mom in most cases, are just kind of bland. They're just horror archetypes there to be sacrificed eventually. But I'm fine giving it a zero because of what we consider to be a one.
Yeah.
So next up, we've got directing. I guess I'll start. Given the fact that this is his real first budget film, I like quite a bit of the directing when it comes to the second half, and I actually like a lot of what he does in the first half for what he can do and what he pulls out of the actors. Because I'm gonna be honest, when it comes to these actors, I don't know anything about any of the actors aside from Vin Diesel and Keith David. So I think pulling that out of these actors, I think is enough to give him a one.
Yeah, well, I don't like the direction in the movie, and I might be inclined to give it a zero because the choices don't really work for me for the most part. I will say that I do have a soft spot for people making movies at a budget, and also I always will appreciate when somebody's making distinct choices, even if I don't agree with that those choices are good, because somebody's gonna like it. It just wasn't me. So for that, I'm willing to bend to give it a one.
Okay. Next up is action.
Yeah, as far as the action goes in this, it's nothing spectacular. It's mostly hidden in shadows, which is part of the point of it. But it deals with monsters, and I do think that like some of the kills are kind of fun, even though they don't look great most of the time. But like the girl getting cut in half, and still screaming and spinning, there's some fun,
Yeah, that
campy
doesn't make
moments.
yeah.
I like that though, because it's a fun, just kind of dumb, campy moment that I
Yeah.
wish this movie had more of.
It's
And
also
I
like it's sorry, but it's one of
no,
the
yeah,
first like notions, oh, it's going to be like this movie. I
yeah,
mean, Zeke dies in that kind of way, and so do some of Imam's children. But like getting cut in half, and then still screaming while spinning, that is very Sam Raimi. So yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
see why
very
you like it.
goofy. It doesn't look great. Those are the parts that definitely look the worst, like when Johns' head gets chomped by the monster. It doesn't look great, but it is kind of fun because they leaned into the camp quality. So as much as um, out of everything, I feel the most comfortable giving this a one. Still not a two for me.
I'm definitely going to agree. What I think for a two for action would be a little bit more. What I do
Yes.
like as well, and something I'll touch on that we didn't really before, the very start of this movie, the first action sequence is the meteor shower that leads to the spacecraft falling into the atmosphere. That has quite a bit of shaky cam, but I can understand what's happening completely, and that is
Yeah, I never was lost.
incredible.
Yes.
That is an incredible feat to have happen. So I think quite a bit of, and maybe this is just because we did Batman Begins and a lot of the action doesn't make a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Actually having action where it makes sense is a huge plus for me. So I'm
Yes.
also going to give it a one.
All right.
Next up we do have acting, and I'll start on
Acting.
this. I do believe this is a firm one because of the fact that they are small little known character or little known actors who actually give it their all, aside from one. But I do think quite a bit of the acting is quite good for what the writing gives and for what can be gained out of the actors.
What I wrote down was that the actors in this movie are giving performances that are overly forgettable. Um,
I agree with that, actually.
I just, which a lot of that comes down to the actual characters themselves, but I
Mhm.
really don't think that the actors, for the most part, are elevating that either. I think it's all pretty flat performances. So, me personally, I would say that the acting in this movie is not particularly good, which would mean a zero for me. But like to what you're saying, I am willing to bend and give it a one.
I think just because if they had gotten A-list actors with their budget and they still would have gotten these performances, it's an easy zero. But I do think if they got A-list actors, they definitely would have gotten better acting from this, and it
So
would have
you're
been
grading on a
solidly
curve.
into one. A little bit, yes. I mean, I'm just trying to put it into context for
Yeah,
at the
that's
time.
fine. Once again, I'm willing. Your points, I feel your points that you swayed me.
All right, next up is visuals. You can start if you'd like.
Um, Being the budget that it is and being a science fiction movie in the early 2000s, it was never going to look great. I really think that a lot of the shot choices are quite poor, but that's more in the directing, the actual look of the film.
The shot choices might
Um,
actually be directing and editing, uh, perhaps.
yeah. So
At least
the
because we
the
don't
the
have
look of the
cinematography.
film, I okay. So I liked the overexposure,
Mm-hmm.
in the early parts. I didn't like the switch between the blue and the yellow. That just wasn't very good. Um, and just other visual things, especially early on. But then there's the stuff at night that I think is presented pretty well. So I'm willing to give it a one just because they are working on the budget that they are. It is pretty ambitious and it all reads well enough.
I think just as well. I think that the echolocation factor, the shots that are actually echolocation, I quite like because the only thing you see from the monster's perspective is faces and general, well, that'd be like facial expressions and people moving. So, and that's interesting. I have no idea how they got that kind of shot, but it's impressive to me, or at least to make it look presentable in a way that isn't to make static look presentable. I
Yeah,
think
it
is a
looked
feat.
like static to me. It wasn't like that exciting, but
It's not that exciting,
it
but it is kind of
it
cool.
read the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're only supposed to gather that that is what the monsters see, and
Yeah.
it certainly does it better than some of the other horror movies that do monster vision a little bit weird. Sometimes they'll just do it like they're close to the ground and it's like tunnel vision, but I appreciate that they went above and beyond. So I'll give it a one.
Yeah.
Next one up is
Um
editing.
Editing I feel pretty strongly on giving a zero. There's the action stuff is not very demanding within the editing. It's more about the suspense of the scene rather than the actual action of the scene. So while that's all handled well enough, there are scenes in this movie that end abruptly and strangely. There are the shot choices and once again the color choices that really actually comes down into the editing more so than any other department here.
Mm-hmm.
How that's presented, the color grade, all of that stuff's done in editing. That is where a lot of my issues for the movie actually exist. So that's one that I feel pretty strongly about being a zero.
I'll give that to you. I think if we could do point fives, I would still give it a point five because there are some shots that I like the small water droplet, letting us know that they actually did find water. Going from that to uh, the other shot
Yeah,
is
a
pretty
couple of
pretty good.
good transitions and stuff does not a good edit make for me. But I understand what you're saying. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is the worst thing in the world, but I don't think it's good. And it was the part that, like, there
This is
were
also
definitely,
and of course I'm not a movie connoisseur at by any stretch of the imagination. I know some things, but what is it, the Dutch angle that they use when Fry is coming up to essentially interrogate Riddick about killing Zeke. They use two Dutch angles. They use one kind of cantered over to the right to show Fry, and then cantered over to the left to show Riddick. And I actually did like, and it wasn't over the top like they do in like Thor, 2009, which I think
Oh, you
is
just reminded me though, saying that, you just reminded me there's a couple of times where the shot is like tilted and stretched
yeah, yeah.
to like
So
have like
like
a
when
weird
Zeke
effect.
dies, yeah, no, that I will absolutely agree. That is a
Oh,
terrible way of showing that.
there's like so much stuff like that that's just like, this is cheaply done and done poorly. Like,
Yeah.
this is not good. Like, you just took the image and
Oddly enough,
stretched it.
oddly enough, the cinematographer is the same one from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which
I've
should
actually never
answer a
seen
few.
Beyond Thunderdome.
You
That's
haven't
the
seen
only
Beyond
Mad Max.
Thunderdome?
I've seen all the other ones. I love all the other ones. I just happen to not have seen Thunderdome.
Yeah, I'm pretty middle of the pack when it comes to that movie.
Yeah,
But
most people are.
yeah.
So that's why I never
Um,
felt so inclined to go to it. But
I am definitely okay giving editing a 0 there.
yeah,
Next one is sound. I will
sound.
start. I'll start with
Okay, you
this
go.
one. The sound effects and sound mixing to me are fine. Enough to give it a 1. What I really don't like is the score. Especially the action score scenes are absolutely awful. It's like da da dun da da dun dun da 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 dun da da during
It's very generic.
when they're running to the ship.
Yeah,
It doesn't
it's all
make
very
any
generic.
sense at all.
Yeah, it's not very good. It's pretty generic. But yeah, the sound design otherwise, like I think the monster creature design is
The
all
monster
good.
creature design is fantastic because it's kind of high pitched
Yeah,
and it sounds like something that would sound if that creature had echolocation. That's how you would expect an echolocation monster to sound. So I do like that. It sounds a little bit
yeah.
like a dinosaur from Jurassic Park too.
Yeah, yeah, it had some it there was unique alien sound design,
Hmm.
and they through sound they built the world pretty well. Like,
Yeah.
I never was like, that's weird. I wasn't taken out of it sound. I will say it's not great either. It's just fine. There
Hmm.
was I put on subtitles because I couldn't hear Vin Diesel a lot of the time.
Yeah,
um
I get that.
which I'm just, yeah, it's just like there's some stuff like that in there, and I once again I wouldn't say it's great. But yeah, I'm willing to give it a 1.
All right. Last category we have is impact. This I would say is our most unknown when it comes to categories. It's not
This
exactly known
one
what we say
is
for this.
interesting to me. I will say that, based purely on the fact that it has a cult following enough to get it spawn 2 sequels from it, and the fact that by the third one they were making money. That one's definitely, like, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was
Apologies, there's a storm.
profitable. Oh yeah.
You
They're
probably got
not
that.
big money winners or anything, but they, once again, it had a cult following that allowed this movie to get 2 follow-ups, 2 video game spin-offs that were apparently pretty good and successful. And people still ask about this movie series coming back every once in a while. And apparently there's a 4th one in development. I don't know what stage it is within that development, but apparently it's like on the table. So I will say it's not like a major franchise. It's not something that's carrying a lot of weight. It doesn't have any accolades to its name, really. It's just kind of something that the people who like it really like it, to the
It
point where,
just won't die,
yeah, it won't die. So I have to give it a 1 for that.
and I agree completely. It doesn't have anything surrounding like cinema impact at all, aside from the fact that it just won't die. But
Yeah.
that's something that I can
Yeah.
agree with a lot of people that
Just
that's why I like it.
longevity
Hmm.
is a way of impact still. It's just
Yeah,
around long enough that people know what it is. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's definitely more influenced by things than it is influential, I
Hmm.
think. But yeah, it's just been around, so I have to give it credit for that.
The fact that, I mean, say what you want about the Alien franchise nowadays, but it's somehow managed to stay just a little bit longer.
But they've made Alien movies more recently than Riddick movies.
No, I know, but look at the quality of them.
I liked Covenant,
Oh man,
and I liked Prometheus.
I'm gonna have to disagree so hard.
Uh,
The way
maybe for
the way that you feel about this movie, I feel exactly about Prometheus.
oh really?
Yeah,
No, I like Prometheus quite a bit actually. So,
yeah.
Maybe we talk about this and have the exact same discussion, but in reverse.
We probably would. And trust me, I didn't take a lot of notes for this one because I didn't want to defend the points so strongly because quite a bit of it is subjective. There's a couple of things I can defend, but only if I took the time, and I don't really want to take the time. So,
Yeah, I
but
understand.
with Prometheus, I could, if I took the time to write it down, I could destroy that movie.
Yeah, like I know that you like Chronicles of Riddick more than this one. So you liking that one as much as you do, you'd probably have more
Well,
reason to
liking it
defend
and
it.
understanding how just because I like it, I don't think I would be able to defend it as well as this movie. Um, and also liking it doesn't mean that I think it's a better movie. I think this is a
Well,
much better movie.
but you might have more reason to kind
Yeah,
of
I'm more
put
passionate about
behind.
it, definitely.
Yeah, you're more passion behind your defense rather than I feel like you like this movie, but you told me that you loved Chronicles of Riddick,
Hmm.
which is not one that I share that opinion of. So, but I think having a strong opinion about it one way or another, you're gonna have a lot more to say about it.
Hmm.
Yeah, but
So,
so looking at the
final score, we got 8
yep,
out of 20. 4
eight
out
out
of
of
10.
20, well, 4 out of 10. That's about what I would rate it.
Hmm.
Um, Personally, I don't that to me is not very good. It's not terrible. It's a little bit below average to me, is what I would say. Um, if I was a little bit friendlier to it, if I liked it, maybe I would feel like, oh, this is a 6 or 7 out of 10.
Honestly, see, that's when our point system comes into play because even with all this, I think the only things I would give better would be characters of one and not really much else. Maybe world building a two if I acknowledge the fact that the other two movies don't exist, which would have been easy to do from 2000 to 2004. The world building, if you take into account just this movie, just the fact that they introduce the fact that there is a shipping company that ships essentially coach and there are mercs traveling with prisoners. I think they could have gone more in depth. I suspect the reason why Johns is traveling in a very cheap transport with Riddick is probably because of something that happens in the later movies where any crew that goes after Riddick will find themselves almost all dead. So I suspect Johns actually had a crew, but all of them died, leading to him capturing Riddick alone and then
Right.
having to they of course don't go over that at all in either movie or anything like that. Oh, they kind of do in 2013 Riddick because spoiler alert, not really a spoiler, but John's father hunts down Riddick and is
Oh,
trying to
okay.
figure out what happened to his son.
The only
So
thing I know about the 2013 one is that Katie Sackhoff is in it, and it's kind of a return to basics.
I have no idea. You're gonna have to tell me who she played because
She's Bo-Katan in The Mandalorian.
okay, that doesn't help me because
Red hair Mandalorian character. Doesn't matter.
haven't seen man doesn't matter doesn't wait let me we're on IMDb, let me just look it up.
We're,
Oh,
we're
Katie
kind of
Sackhoff is
like,
Doll. Yeah, she's got blonde hair in this movie.
yes, she usually has blonde hair.
Hmm. I mean, I haven't seen The Mandalorian. I've seen like, and it was a long time ago. I saw the first season, but nothing else.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, when it comes to, you got to understand this about me. When it comes to new movies, well, mostly new movies and new TV shows, I don't watch any. So
Well, you and I are very different. Um,
that's why I
I'm
think this
watching new
could be
stuff. I'm watching old
successful
stuff.
because I'm very apathetic. I don't
Well,
care.
okay, so the movie that we'll do next week is Brian De Palma's The Untouchables,
Okay,
starring Kevin Costner.
Kevin of Costner. Wow.
Kevin of Costner, 1987. So I've been watching a lot of De Palma lately. That's one of my favorites of his. But it's a lot different than a lot of his other stuff. More of a period piece kind of drama about um, I forgot his
I have
name,
not
but
seen this. I have not seen this movie, but I know it's about Al Capone.
I forgot the specifics of everything, but I've only seen it the once, but it was a couple years ago, and I was like, this is great. I love this. There's a couple of like all-timer scenes in there for sure. This one is one I feel pretty
This will be
strongly
good
about
actually
loving.
because I know actually very little about this movie. I've
Yeah.
definitely not seen anything about it.
So yeah, Untouchables is the movie that we're going to be doing the next episode, and yeah, we're very excited about that.
Yeah.